Last time I've shown you how to decorate your Express application with OpenAPI. Now let's see how to use these docs on the front end. Hi, my name is Tomasz and I'm a former tech lead and manager. Today I will show you how to turn your OpenAPI document into a fully working, fully typed REST client. For years, I've been happily using 30 Cuman's TypeScript OpenAPI code gen, but as it turns out, due to lack of time, the author himself suggests using Hey API. And this is what we are going to use today. The whole process is actually very quick. One thing we need to start is, well, the OpenAPI file. If you followed my OpenAPI Express video, you will have the file generated from there. But if you don't, that's cool, any document will do. For the sake of cleanliness and to have a bit more methods than just the ones we defined, I will use fake REST API. To get the schema, click on the link under the title and save it somewhere. All right, so to get started, first let's create a project with React and TypeScript using Vite. So npm create Vite app latest template React TS, and the project name will be what? React Open API Gen. Cool, and that's that. So this is for the project, and we can now just go there and install all the dependencies. While this is happening, let's see where we can get the OpenAPI schema. As I've mentioned, I will be using fake API, and to get the Swagger file, you just have to click this and save it. Alright, so I've put the Swagger into docs directory. It looks like this. It's just a simple JSON document, so nothing really fancy here. Again, any valid OpenAPI 3.0 will work here. So let's start our work by installing the actual Hey API. Hey API slash OpenAPI TypeScript. And this is a development dependency because we will use this to generate the client. But the next one is a production dependency because this is the client and we will be using this to perform all the fetching. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to configure the generator, and it can be run via npx or via command line with the packages we just installed, but I suggest creating a file and configuring it programmatically. It's a terrible word and I'm pretty sure I just botched it. Okay, so scripts rpgen.ts. All right, so we are importing the create client from OpenAPI generator, and we can just wrap this just to be sure. So await create client, and I already have some suggestions from GitHub because I was doing this earlier. But what we need to do is we need to define the client. So that what we have installed just a few moments ago. So client fetch. There's also client Axios, and there's a legacy client, I believe. We need to define where the file is. So docs slash swagger JSON. It is important to notice that this is relative to where the script will be run from and not where the script resides. So if we will run this from a main directory like in here, then it should go with slash docs slash swagger. And the last thing is where it should be generated. So yeah, source slash API is fine with me. And catch Now we need to run this because this is a TypeScript file, and we could probably build this with TypeScript, but I don't see a point. So let's just install tsx minus d because this is a dependency for development only. And I suggest adding this to the package just to have it, you know. Right, so we have our new directory API and it has 4 files. Going from the top, there are all the schemas pulled from the Swagger and put in here in a form of JavaScript object. You have every field defined. This is an int, this is a string, this is a string that formats as a date time, and this is a boolean. So you can use this to verify whether your input is proper when you, for example, pull something from the backend. You can go with something like activity properties title is nullable. There are tons of situations where you might use this, for example, with Zot or with anything other than you use for validation. Next thing is services, which is the meat of our newly generated code. And every endpoint, as you can see, every endpoint has its own URL and it has its own verb. So get, post, and so forth and so on. And it accepts some options that are also typed, and it returns in here stuff like in here, right? So it returns this. So this is an activity. It can show an error, which is unknown. So this didn't have errors defined. So these are basically the functions that we will be using. And as you saw, there are also types file. So everything like in here we got schemas that are well defined, but in here we have TypeScript types to use in our application. So you will see in a minute how we can utilize this to make everything very, very type safe. And of course, for convenience, everything is exported from the index, so we can just, go with API and we don't need to put, slash type or whatever. So that's that. All right, so we have everything generated. Let's put it to work. For brevity, I will work mostly in app.tsx, but normally you probably will restructure this somehow. So I am cleaning everything in here, return. Yeah, so let's run this and see if it works. Hello. Yeah, so it does work. So we can go to work. So first thing what we want to do is to import the actual client from the API, and we need to configure it. So client.setConfig, and it accepts several options, but what we want to do is for now just want to import the base URL, and let me just copy paste it because this is too long to write basically, but we also can put headers in here and all this stuff. So for now, let's just fetch the activities, right? So const, and this is of course use state, and this won't be any, but we can now go and see. So we want to get the activities, right? So get activities, and what it returns, we can just take this and put it in here, and that's that. This guarantees proper typing for us. So I now will do something you really shouldn't do. So I will define a use effect that will run on the start. Basically, what we want to do is whether activities is an is empty, is basically undefined. We want to do a fetch. So if activities just return early, and now we can go with this, famously funny construct because we want to do const data equals, and now await get API activities, and now set activities to data. As you can see, there's no wiggly lines, no highlights, so tabs are all there. And this we can inspect how this works. So this is an array of activity, right? Array of this. Perfect. Now, if activities and activities length, sorry, and we can just return a list, and yeah, roughly like this. But we have title, and this is provided by the types. So this is really great. Okay, let's save it. And there we go. There we go. Let's inspect this to make sure. Activities exactly. 200 get okay. And it returns the 30 activities that we want. Great. All right. But fetching data is the easy part. Now let's do deleting the data. So what I would like to do is to have like a loading state to make sure we are locking our UI when transactions are happening. So what I want to do now is to define a function to delete, sorry, the uh, activity by the number, yeah. So we go obviously with try. What is happening with me in the brackets today? We start loading, of course, and await delete API by ID. And what we, yeah, this is correct. We want to go by path. So it translates to, sorry, to API activities, something like this. And what does it return? It returns delete, but this is unknown. So we can see that it returns nothing. That's why we will need to do the filtering ourselves. Luckily, this is not very complex. So basically we are filtering out all the items with the ID of this one. This is a very simple pattern from React to use this is called the callback function, and we are basically using what is currently held in the state. We could be doing like if activities and just go with activities, but as you can see, there's already currently undefined that is, sorry, we can go with this, and it would refer to this, but using this pattern, we are making sure that we are always using the latest data available. So that's pretty important, if you ask me. Hold on, we have one bracket too many. Sorry. All right, so catch, just console error for the sake of it. Fail to delete, and finally set loading to false. So no matter what happens, no matter if this is fine or not fine, if this succeeds or does not succeed, we will stop the loading. Okay, so now we need to expand the UI. What I like to do is to define a function on the lead exactly to have it on click. Okay, so we have this. Let's give something like, I don't know, HR, and but hold on, I put this in the wrong place. I'm sorry. It should be ID as number. Right, on delete and disable. We will disable this whenever the loading takes place. Not the most beautiful UI, I can tell you that. So let's turn our network inspector and what? Let's delete one. Yeah, works. We can delete everything. So this works fine, and obviously this API is really immutable. So even if it returns 200 okay on post or put or whatever, it doesn't really modify, so everyone can use it at the same time and nobody will break anybody else's work. Okay, so one thing I like to have in such projects is to have a bit more order. And I know this is back to school vibes. So one way to have this order is to move things into a hook. So let's create a hook for the API. It's quite amazing how often I'm making such files. Basically, we want to do the same as we did in here. So import import everything as says, because we will export services. I mean, we will return services. So API services. And we also want to import type of config from the client. So we will be able to override our configuration. So export const use API. And what we want here is to have like an override of type config, which defaults to an empty object. So now we can do this, or we can do this a bit cleaner. So config of type config equals to this, and we just use it in here. We just merge two objects, which is a bit more readable. And the final thing is let's export types. So we can import everything from here instead of from two places. All right, so we remove this entirely and we go import use API. And now we just go with API, use API with no override. And this can be also imported from here. And the only change is basically we need to add, we can remove this, delete, and in use effect we have this one. And that's it. As you can see, it all works fine. And it deletes fine. So this was very quick and very, I would say, painless for the change. So we are home. But speaking of order, I like to have code formatted accordingly to the standards. So let's install Prettier. And in the meantime, let's create a Prettier config MJS. And I will just get my old config, hold on, from my starter, because I simply love this config. And what we can do now is to force our generator to reformat our code according to the prettier config. It also supports other code tidying tools, but Prettier is basically a market standard, so I will be going with this. Right, so to do this, we need to, in the IPA file, we need to change the output, and this is from a string, because if we put a string in here, it will just use this as a path, but we need to do this and then format, and we can go with Prettier. And now, remember, this looks like that. So it's one-liners that are pretty ugly. So let's run this one more time. Generate API. And we had running prettier, which seems that it formatted, and it did. So now we have a very readable, very nice file that is easy to read, easy to follow. And that's that. We've created a very simple hook using our generated API, and we are using this to do all our operations in the API. No typings, no checking what the response is, no remembering endpoints. All we need to do is just to generate the client and use it. Thank you for watching till the end, and happy coding.